All right, Buck fans, we are finally here. It is week one of the 2023 National Football League season. We've waded through all the off-season stuff, free agency, the draft, training camp, preseason games, and all the rest. And we are finally ready to go to Minnesota in week one. We are here for the No Quarter Given podcast, season premiere, week one preview, and we've got the full gang of participants here with us today. We've got the creator of BuckPower.com, one Paul Stewart, live from England with us. And we also have the new, I got to give him his props here, co-host and executive producer of the J.P. Peterson Show, as well as still host of the Sports Web, which we all know. His contract, Paul, was renewed once again by Jason Light. He's on a one-year contract for the No Quarter Given podcast 2023 version, part of the BuckPower.com podcast network. Welcome in, gentlemen, for another year of No Quarter Given.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
I'm very pleased. I've decided to double your contract rate for this year, Peter.
All right. Sounds good. I don't want to get into an Evans situation now, Paul.
No, I'm gonna pay you twice as much as I paid you last year. How about that?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
He'll get 4 chicken wings instead of 2 this time.
Oh,
that's the
there
one.
You go.
And a free Diet Coke.
That's right. Well, again, folks, appreciate you finding us part of the BuckPower.com podcast network. You can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. If you haven't already done so, hit subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast platform. Paul, before we get started, give the fans who maybe don't know about BuckPower.com, give them a quick little overview of what the website is and what you do and how long it's been around.
Oh, it's been around. It's in its 22nd year now, Jason. We've had over 100 million hits. It's every player, every game, everything Bucs, BuckPower.com. Anything you want to know about history of the franchise, we've got video highlights of games on this day. We're doing a countdown of the 100 best Buccaneers. But yeah, any question you've ever got about the Bucs, BuckPower.com. That's the place to go.
And I got to give him a little plug. He just put out a brand new podcast a couple of days ago highlighting the 1985 season opener against the Chicago Bears. I definitely recommend you listening to it. Excellent work with Randy Grimes. You and Randy break down all things Chicago Bears and Buccaneers in week one. There was some Steve DeBerg. There was some Kevin House, some James Wilder, all the rest from back in the 85 season. Was that Lehman Bennett's first game, correct, as head coach?
Yes, it was. And the reason we've done it is because it was a real turning point in franchise history. It was the first game without John McKay as head coach, first game without Leroy Selman, and the Bucs were playing the eventual Super Bowl champions, the great 46 defense of the Bears. So, yeah, we tell a lot of good stories. We take you back to the mid-1980s when the music was good and Buccaneer football wasn't.
All right, so let's get into the 2023 Buccaneers coming off of an 8-9 regular season in 2022. Somehow we win the NFC South at 8-9. We go down to the Dallas Cowboys in the wild card round. Tom Brady no longer a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. We're going to get into those couple storylines. The Bucs come into 2023 about $77 million in dead cap money because paying all the credit card bills that we had to restructure for the last 3 years. All those credit cards are time to be paid, and this is the year the Buccaneers are paying them. So basically $77 million in dead cap money, which leads to our first topic of roster construction for this year and probably an unprecedented year for the Buccaneers. 13 rookies make the roster, the initial 53-man roster, with 6 of those 13 being undrafted free agents. Paul Stewart, to you first. Has there ever been a year that the Buccaneers have had this many rookies and or undrafted free agents make the roster that you can remember?
Well, I've gone back through my archives and I can't find anything like it, Jason. And like you say, it is a case of paying the credit card bill. I have no problem with what the Buccaneers did in 21 and 22. They went for it. There's a Vince Lombardi trophy at One Buck Place because they went for it with Tom Brady. And I have no problem with going through a couple of lean years in return for that. Every NFL franchise would do the same. Every NFL fan base would do the same. So, yes, it's going to be a very young team. And I think we have to temper our expectations around that. And if we were to repeat an 8-9 season, I'd be very happy with it. But it's a case of, yes, we've got some young players. Give them a chance to develop, to see how they get on. And I'm looking forward to it, but I'm realistic with what I'm expecting from this coming season.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about these rookies, but they're very talented, and on top of it, undrafted rookies. So they have lots of talent there, and I still feel like that's the key word with this Tampa Bay Buccaneer team in 2023. It's not like they're all young. They do have some veterans coming off of that Super Bowl just a couple years ago. So, yeah, you can go ahead and be realistic about your expectations, but also there is talent. So it's kind of a nice mix there of veteran and rookie talent. And I expect some big things, especially playing in that NFC South, which is probably the worst division in football.
And you're going to see offensively, you're going to see some young guys, Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Cody Mock. You're going to see obviously a second-year guy, Luke Gedeke. So you're going to see more young guys, I think, contributing on offense, but you're also going to have on defense. You're going to have some depth guys, but you're also going to have Kalijah Cansey's going to be in the mix. Izzian's going to be your nickel corner, who's an undrafted guy. Much more veterans on defense that not as concerned about the young guys. It's offensively, can the young guys handle the rigors of a 17-game season? Can they handle the offensive playbook? Being where they're supposed to be, especially at wide receiver. You're going to have Tompkins, Jarrett, and Palmer as your 3, 4, and 5 receivers behind Godwin and Evans. Can those three guys, as young players, handle the load of being young players and productive?
And how fast?
Yeah, I think that what this takes me back to is actually the 1987 season when Ray Perkins came in, and he had to use all the draft picks because there was nothing in the cupboard at all left by Lehman Bennett. The end of the 86 season was the worst I've ever seen the Buccaneer franchise. So he had to go out and draft a whole new receiving corps and start again. Now, at least there is talent there. Like you said, there's enough veteran experience left over from the Super Bowl run that can lead this team. But yeah, you're right. We're putting a lot of faith in the receiving corps, and any kind of injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and wow, we could be in serious trouble.
No, absolutely. You could definitely be in serious trouble, but the flashes of brilliance, if you will, I get it, it's preseason, but Trey Palmer has definitely showed some flashes. You also have Raheem Jarrett, who they like, and Devin Tompkins most likely being your kick returner and also possibly your punt returner. So, you know, the future is bright, but I still believe the future is now. And you're exactly right, Mr. Stewart. I would have did the same thing. I would have gone all in for Brady. You got yourself a Super Bowl. You had an opportunity to get yourself a second Super Bowl. That's neither here nor there. Injuries and, of course, Antonio Brown stopped that from happening. But you know what? Maybe this team may be a little bit better than last year's team because you don't have all those distractions that you have with Tom Brady. That's what I'm looking forward to.
And you have a lot of hungry guys, a lot of guys trying to establish a career in the league. Whereas last year you had the end of the road for some older guys. The motivation level may not have been, the work ethic may not have been where it probably needed to be, where you definitely have this year you got so many young guys fighting for their jobs and to stay on the roster. So, all right. Obviously the Ryan Jensen news going to IR. Probably the end, potentially the end of his career in general, probably the end of his career with the Buccaneers. They've restructured his contract for next year a little bit to give the Bucs a little salary cap relief. But quick thought on Ryan Jensen and kind of the scenario he's facing.
Yeah, it's very sad. I was actually there the day he was introduced, his first press conference for the Bucs in 2018, and I got talking to him and his wife. Lovely guy. You know, a real character, but wow, what a leader on the field. And you can only imagine what he's like in the locker room and in training camp, you know, with the players and encouraging them around him. And the fact that he's already said he is going to be there every day on the field with the players, encourage them, that can only be a good thing. It's a very sad thing. I'm glad he's been paid. I'm glad he's got his Super Bowl ring. And if it is the end of the road, thank you for the memories, but his job with the Buccaneers is not yet done.
Yeah, a big-time part of that offensive line that led that team to the Super Bowl 55 victory, his grit, his athleticism to get to the second level. And, guys, he could go down as one of the greatest offensive linemen in Buccaneer history with just all those things that we talked about. But I think you could kind of see how he was emotionally a couple months ago when he was talking about coming back. You kind of felt like maybe something's more to it than, you know, just being back. So maybe he knew. Who knows, at the end of the day, it is a loss, But this Buccaneer team, I believe, can handle that because Hansy last year, who started at center, is going to have that valuable experience. Now the question is, can he get better? Can this offensive line get better? He was the 12th rated center in Pro Football Focus, so it's not like he's a slouch. But again, this offensive line has to get better, and it starts not only with pass protection, but also opening up those holes for the run game of Rachaad White.
All right, let's get to the quarterback situation. Obviously, Baker Mayfield named the starter after basically the second preseason game, heading into New York. Heading into the Baltimore game. Excuse me. He played very well in the last preseason game at home. Looked very crisp. Beats out Kyle Trask. Peter, first to you, your thoughts on Baker winning the job.
Not really a surprise to me. I mean, 69 career starts. You're going to go with the guy that has that over somebody who has 9, and I get it, the future may be bright with Kyle Trask because he's definitely shown a lot of progression in this preseason and training camp, but you got to go with the experience factor. And I tell you right now, gentlemen, I'm very excited about Baker Mayfield in this offense. I think he fits this offense to a T. I like the tempo in that game versus Baltimore. I like the new wrinkles, the run pass option, the tight end around. I mean, there's a lot of things with this Dave Canales offense that I think we haven't really talked about. And again, they're going to emphasize the run, which is going to take the pressure off of Baker Mayfield. And I think that is the main key, because if you get into a situation where you have to ask him to throw the ball 40 or 50 times, I think that's a recipe for disaster. So I think the offense is tailor-made for him. Not surprised by the decision by the Bucs to go with Mayfield as the starter in 2023.
Paul?
Yeah, I think we've got this revolutionary new idea of we can throw a pass outside of the pocket, which for the last 3 years hasn't been done. And the fact we can actually hold the ball for more than 2.18 seconds before, giving the receivers a chance to go downfield. It's a whole new offense we're going to see. To be honest, I'm still skeptical about Baker Mayfield. There's a reason he's gone through 3 other NFL teams. Now, okay, the situations in 22 weren't great for him in Carolina with the Rams, but he's had a chance and he hasn't yet proven it. So he's on his last chance. If he doesn't get it with Tampa, he's going to be a career backup until he drops out of the NFL. And I think the decision to go with him is also, it's a lot easier to go from Baker to Kyle Trask if it doesn't work than the other way round. Because if Kyle Trask struggled, everyone would be screaming, we want Baker. And that would be really hard for him to do it. And don't forget, the last 2 years, Kyle Trask has had no snaps because pretty much Brady hogged the whole thing for himself all through practice. So they both look really good. You've got the old adage, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've got no quarterbacks. At the moment, Baker is the number 1. We get behind him. But if there's any kind of problem, I've got a lot of faith in the guy standing there on the sideline wearing the number 2 shirt.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key
go ahead.
to it.
Go ahead,
I really do. They got to get off to a fast start. You're exactly right. And it's going to be tough because you have Minnesota on the road, not a great defense, so maybe you can score some points in that game, but offensively tough. You have the Chicago Bears, which is an approved team, Monday Night Football versus the Philadelphia Eagles. You have the Saints on the road. And then in between there, you have the Lions and the bye week. So you got to get off to a good start. If not, you could look at that bye week and say, you know what? Maybe you need to switch over to Kyle Trask, and that is going to be the key. Did they play their starters enough in that preseason? Hopefully they did. Hopefully they come out swinging, because if not, I don't think Todd Bowles can, he can be patient. I think you got to go with Kyle Trask at that bye week if Baker struggles.
And part of it, I think, will be how the division goes. If somebody jumps out to a 2-3 game lead in the division after 6 or 7 weeks, that may affect Todd's decision. Do you play Kyle Trask sooner or later? And so I think how the Bucs hang in the division race will play a lot of this. Paul, give me a quick thought on Dave Canales. I've been impressed with his offensive philosophy, and obviously we've not seen all the plays they're going to run in the regular season. We get that, but just the movement and the different formational things that he's been doing, I've liked what I've seen out of Dave Canales.
I think it's just different, Jason, to what we've seen the last 3 years, which was drop back, throw it as quickly as you can. So the fact that we've got new options and new wrinkles is going to be great. Now, as I said, I've been on record. I think Byron Leftwich had a really tough deal, and it was not his fault. A lot of the problems at the end of last year, it was Brady causing the problems because he was so one-dimensional. So, yeah, I love what I've seen, and you're right. You don't show your full hand in pre-season. Very optimistic, very excited to see how it works. But again, if it doesn't work, temper your expectations, give it time to develop. It's not how you play in the first 2 weeks of September. It's how you play across the entire 17 weeks of an NFL regular season.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I tell you right now, Canales started off coaching under Pete Carroll, 28 years old, very charismatic. I definitely think he's got a future in the National Football League as a head coaching candidate. And it's not just Baker that has something to prove, right? It's Canales. He wants to prove this because if he's has one of the top 10 offense or top 5 offense, there's going to be teams out there calling you, and you're going to have a good problem on your hands with Mr. Canales. So I like everything I've seen so far. Of course, it doesn't mean anything until the regular season starts versus the Vikings on the road.
All right, let's get to the contractual news of the week that kind of just broke it late this week. We were recording this on Saturday. The news broke on kind of Friday that Mike Evans has basically told the Buccaneers, if I don't have a new contract by opening day, that we're not going to have any more discussions and that we're going to play it out. And the odds are I won't be a Buccaneer potentially afterwards. Well, first of all, he doesn't have the leverage there because if his contract expires, the Buccaneers could franchise tag him if they choose to. So he doesn't have full freedom to leave, but he's made the point he wants to end his career Buccaneer. He's 30 years old, about to be 31 at some point here during the season. He's a career. I mean, been a great Buccaneer. Year 10 coming up, has had 1,000 yards. We know the greatness that he's portrayed. Paul Stewart, to you, do you feel like the Bucs are getting strong-armed here, or do you feel like that it's a must that they get a deal done by the regular season opener?
No, I don't think you need to get a deal done. Like you say, this is his 10th season in the NFL. And I think this was a tactic by his agent to try and push something. It was almost like emotional blackmail. Oh, look what he's given to the Buccaneers. You've got to give him a new deal accordingly. It's not what you've done in the past. It's the old Janet Jackson line, what have you done for me lately? And it's what he's going to do during 23 and what would he bring in 24 and 25 as an 11 and 12-year veteran. Right. So I totally understand why you would not give an extension right now. You have to wait. And unfortunately, if it means he tests free agency, you have to let him test free agency.
And look, I completely agree with you on this because I think it is what have you done for me lately. Here's a guy, 9 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, but if you look at that season last year, whether it was the offense, Brady seeing his best days, he only had 6 touchdowns, so maybe this is a wait-and-see thing. I thought the most interesting thing that came out about it, the most interesting facet was that ownership was mentioned, not necessarily Jason Light in the front office. So is this an ownership thing? Are the Glazers going to Jason Light and saying, you know what? Let's see what he does this year. Can he stay healthy? Can he have a fantastic year? Does he work into this offense? And if he does, then I think the Glazers, Jason Light and Mike Greenberg will work this out. But until then, maybe it's a wait-and-see approach. And you look at it, they did the same thing with Levante David. They did the same thing with Jamel Dean, and it worked out into their favor because there wasn't a market out there. Now, that's not to say there isn't a market out there for Mr. Evans because I believe he is a Hall of Fame player. But if he does have another down year at 30 years old, being 31 next year, his value may not be as high as he thinks it is.
I think that was, again, a tactic by the agent to involve the Glazers. Now, I've known Brian and Joel a long, long time. They do not get involved in player decisions. They've put the trust in Jason Light and the coaching staff, and that will be where the decision is made. So that was a tactic by the agent to get them involved. It would not be a case of them trying to save money or not doing a deal. That would never, ever come into it. Look how much they've spent up front over the last few years to give everything on the field. So that was a tactic from the agent. And to be honest, I thought it was a really cheap shot by his agent to do it.
I thought it was too, and I thought the most interesting facet of the conversation was also the fact of we've been trying for 2 years, and this front office has not given us any contract details. They have not tried to do a contract over the last couple of years because all we've heard from the other sources is that the Bucs were working on an extension, and now all of a sudden the Bucs have done no negotiating in the last 2 years. I agree with you. I love the Glazers. I think they get a bad rap in this town. They've done everything the last couple years to make sure this team is a winner, and it seems like if it's possible, they're going to do everything they can to make sure the Bucs stay competitive.
And the other logical thing behind this is the salary cap. This is not the year to be handing out huge extensions because they're so strapped against the cap. Next year, they're going to be in a much better position to be able to extend Tristan Wirfs, Winfield. That's the other thing. You have other guys you have to extend that are younger, much younger. Devin White potentially, Winfield, Wirfs, those kind of guys that Mike's probably not the number one on the list as far as priority, because you can franchise tag him next year at about 20, 25 million, whatever the number is for franchise tags. But you have that option if you're the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and I think
well, one thing to remember is NFL players only care about two things: winning a ring and getting paid. Once they've got the ring, they want to get paid. If once they've been paid, they want to get the ring, and vice versa. Mike Evans has already got a Super Bowl ring, so what's he after now? How much money can I make?
Right.
That's it. And it comes down to what kind of contract. The rumor is that Cooper Kupp type of money, 3 years. Well, Cooper Kupp right now is not looking too good because he has hamstring injuries. So are you going to pay a receiver that is getting up there? And I still think he has about 3 or 4 years. Let's not get it twisted here. Evans didn't play in the preseason. There's a reason he's trying to preserve his body, of course, because he's had hamstring problems. And when you get older, a lot of things don't necessarily work. I got up today, my back was hurting. It's been hurting for the last week and a half. I'm not Mike Evans, not saying, there's any comparison. But when you get older, again, your body starts to break down. So we'll see what that breakdown is. And if he does have another 1,000-yard receiving season and he does play at the top of his game, I think the Bucs will go out there and give him the best deal, give him what he's worth. I think they're doing the same thing with Devin White. It's a prove-it year. And if
so basically, Peter, what you're trying to say is that now you're that old, you don't want a third-year contract from me.
I'll take the third-year contract because I don't necessarily have to do anything physical, Paul. I could just sit here in my chair.
And here's the other part of the equation, too. We've mentioned the young players. Trey Palmer. What if he has a great year? He's 22 years old. He could technically, you don't want to stunt his growth if all of a sudden you extend Evans for another 3 years and you got him and Godwin, and not that Palmer couldn't still be productive, but if Palmer is the kind of year you think he can have and Raheem Jarrett plays, maybe you keep Godwin and then maybe you maybe you get something from Mike Evans down the road. And we'd love to all see Mike Evans retire a Buccaneer, but we know most of the time that does not happen around the league, unfortunately.
Yep, because you've had guys like Rice, you've had T.O., you've had Randy Moss go to other teams. They don't stay with their team forever. Even the great Jerry Rice went to the Raiders. So it could definitely happen. And here's the thing. I want to be pessimistic, Pete, for a minute. What happens if you do get off to a bad start and it is a bad year and you're going with Kyle Trask? Do you entertain trading a Mike Evans to a contender to get more draft capital so you can secure a quarterback for next year, unless, of course, Trask is your guy?
All right, you're listening to the No Quarter Given podcast. We're doing our season preview. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're getting through the roster stuff here. We are going to. I'm Jason, Peter Blake, Paul Stewart, the owner, curator of BuckPower.com. We're part of the No Quarter Given podcast. Is part of the BuckPower.com podcast network. We'd love to hear from you. Your comments. You can reach out to me at JPO Sports on X. Paul Stewart, is it Buck Power on X?
Buck Power 1.
Buck Power 1 on X, and Peter Blake?
Yeah, it's P Blake 1003, but I'm barely on X. I'm on Facebook. Peter H. Blake, friend me there, and
I got you.
I'll be your friend, and we'll go and interact.
All right, let's get to the schedule a little bit. We won't go through every single game because that's part of what we'll do during this podcast throughout the years, talk about each week. A couple highlights of the schedule. Obviously, we start week 1 on the road at Minnesota. Week 3, Monday Night Football at home against the Eagles. Week 5 is the bye week. Week 6, home to Detroit, and that's special because it's going to be the creamsicle jersey game where we're going to wear the orange creamsicle jerseys from back in the day. Week 8, we're at Buffalo on Thursday Night Football, which will obviously be a primetime national game. In Week 10, the Tennessee Titans come to town, but that's not the big news. That's not the big news. The big news is the big man from England is coming to town for the Tennessee Titan week and celebrating and enjoying Florida. Paul Stewart, talk about your visit coming in November coming to town.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that once I come over here and taking some hockey as well with the Lightning. One thing about the schedule, Jason, that I always look at is there's a big time difference. There's a 5-hour time difference over here. So compared to you. So a 1 o'clock game is 6 o'clock Sunday evening for me, which is nice and normal. Well, you can imagine what Thursday night and Monday night football is. It's a 1 a.m. start, and it doesn't finish till 4:30 in the morning. I then have a couple of hours sleep and then do my day job. So when Peter asks me at 5 a.m. UK time, do you want to come on the post-game show? All he hears is snoring from this side of the Atlantic. So I'm very glad we haven't got so many national televised games this year. But yeah, I'll see you guys in a couple of months' time for the Tennessee game.
Nice.
Peter's night just gets started about 5 a.m. He's running the streets of Tampa,
Well,
5 a.m.
You would know this because you're my chaperone. You got to be my DD there. That's what they say. No.
He's only out there at 5 a.m. because someone told him it's an 8 o'clock start, Jason.
Any overall comments about the schedule in general? Obviously, the bye week is way earlier. Week 5 is a pretty early bye week. Any other comments about the schedule in general that you like or don't like?
I think the fact there's less national focus on the Buccaneers will be a big thing because everything was driven around Tom Brady, and understandably so. He was the biggest story in the NFL. He's the best player in league history. So you can understand why all the focus was on that and everyone wanted to watch him. The fact there is no Brady means we're more under the radar. There's no trip to Germany this year, which I know everyone says, oh, this is fantastic. We want to go and promote the game. Every NFL team hates going overseas. Every team that's come to London has always said the same off the record. So the fact there's less distractions will be a good thing. We'll get into our division previews, but as I said, I think this is a very weak division. There's only one other team to really worry about. And a quick hint, it's not Atlanta and it's not Carolina.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the Saints, and I agree with you on that. I think what you take out of it is you got to get off to a great start because it is a tough schedule then. And even though you're on the road for the second half of that schedule, there's a lot of favorable matchups there. Maybe not Buffalo and San Francisco, but Indianapolis, Houston. You're going to play some rookie quarterbacks there, so there may be some wins. I would just say, with everybody saying, "Wow, this is a tough schedule," and you're going to be on the road a lot, it actually equals out in the end.
The game we've got against the Florida Gators, we should be favored in.
Absolutely. The way they played the other night versus Utah, geez. I mean, it looked like the Bucs offensive line last year with picking up penalties at critical times. And that, my friend, is on coaching.
All right, we're going to take a quick little timeout here, guys. We're going to be back in just a second. We're going to talk Minnesota Vikings. You're going to hear Paul Stewart's collage and montage preview of the Minnesota Vikings and Buccaneer history. So we'll be back in just a minute. No Quarter Given podcast. Hang in there with us, and we'll see you in just a minute.